Thank you so much for taking your time today. We are hoping that you will find some takeaways from our presentation and that you'll be able to use those for your programs moving forward. You're going to see a map here on your screen that is our entire area that we serve as far as adult ed. You'll see that it's the Carl Sandburg, but what's a little bit different is that the adult ed program is run by the ROE. So we work together with Carl Sandburg in order to create a partnership in order to get some of the different ICAPS created, as well as input on our bridge programs. This following screen has a lot of our different people that have been associated with our ICAPS. We actually started out back in September, and we started working on an ICAPS basically on a Google Doc with some people in the healthcare area, and worked pretty diligently to get our first ICAPS up off the ground. And then from there, we ended up forming what we call our ICAPS advisory team. And that has proved to be very, very beneficial for all of us. And you're going to see some different people. We have our Bridge and Transition Services Coordinator as part of the team, as well as a Bridge and ICAPS Instructor. And they meet regularly with us once a month. And then we have Con Heath from Carl Sandburg, who's the Director of Workforce Education, as well as Ellen Burns, who is the Dean of the CTE. We also have Emily Schaefer, and she was actually one of the original members when I talked about the Google Doc. We started creating the first ICAPS, the CNA ICAPS together, and Stacy Banter, who is the nursing instructor, and she too is one of the original members. And then we have what we call rotating seats. So as we continue to build out the ICAPS, we invite different people to join our team. For example, we had our principal from our RAISE Academy who joined us when we were just starting the automotive ICAPS. We also had some people from financial aid join us, as well as some different instructors, and then some other deans in the college as well. Moving forward, as far as our purposes for creating this advisory team, is it really allowed for us to have some clear conversations. We were able to build those relationships and be able to really take care of things quite quickly because people are sitting right there, and something that might take a long time. For example, there were some people at Carl Sandburg that thought that we had access to Moodle, which is what is used in the classroom. And with just a quick conversation in one of our advisory meetings, we were able to establish that we didn't have what we thought we had, and then they worked hard on their end and had it up and running by the end of the day. It also, when we have our meetings, we do have an agenda for every meeting, and it is not something that is like in stone. Everybody, when we start meeting, can add to the agenda or take away from the agenda because everybody's coming from different angles. So we encourage them to make those changes to the agenda and making sure that everybody has input. And we like to have fun too. And then during that time, we're also creating a plan that everybody's agreeing on as far as the how the ICAPS are being developed and when they're being developed, so that we can really hone in and use our time wisely. This also allows for not a whole lot of emails going back and forth, because you and I both know when you're comparing and trying to create that email to get all those ideas in, it's quite time consuming sometimes. So having these meetings once a month, a lot of things are kind of just pushed away, and we have those conversations once a month and get those things tackled. Not to say that there aren't some emails, because there are, but generally speaking, those relationships are already established, and it just creates for a nice, efficient way of creating ICAPS and moving forward. So just a few things here as far as our ICAPS advisory team. We do meet monthly, and we started out way back in December. We started informally, like I said before, in September. And we kind of got together with the Transitions Academy. And what was kind of neat about the Transitions Academy, even though it was a virtual event, we were invited to go over, we meaning the ROE 33 staff, we were invited to go over to Carl Sandburg, and we were able to all sit in the same room and participate virtually, which allowed for, when there wasn't a presentation going on, some nice sidebar conversations as far as tackling some things that were important to us and moving forward. And then we were able to attend the cohort convo in person. So some of the staff from ROE, our Bridge and Transition Services Coordinator, who's going to be, really spearheading some of the ICAPS here, and myself, and Conhee and Ellen attended the cohort convo, I believe it was in Champaign, in person. And that's where we really started nailing down some of our goals and finding some of our low-hanging fruit that Ellen's going to talk about here in a little bit.
So as Margaret mentioned, at the cohort convos, we did sit together and took that time to identify the programs that we felt would be the most successful to launch in a short turnaround, because our goal was to get at least one program established in the spring of 2023, and then another program established for the fall of 2023, which I'm excited to share that we successfully managed to do because of the close collaboration and teamwork. But at the convos, we sat together and really mapped out what that would look like over the next year or two. And we identified the programs that we felt were, in our opinion, low-hanging fruit. And as we did that, we kind of prioritized it initially based on student interest. So the ROE went to their students in the adult ed program, and they surveyed them to see where their interests were at. That was very helpful, so that we weren't spending our time writing an application and working together on a pathway that wasn't really of interest to many students. Instead, we really focused on the ones that were of interest. And so with that, we also looked at the faculty that taught those courses for our beginning programs. We thought it was important to utilize instructors that were full-time, that had established office hours, that had been with the institution for some time and had their feet on the ground and really knew their programs. Originally at the time, our automotive instructor had been here quite some time, and we thought that would be a good option. However, throughout the course of the year, we had brought on a new instructor. And so we thought, let's give him some time to establish himself in the program before we jump into ICAPS, which by spring he was all about. And so we did end up jumping on board with automotive. But we also looked at our CNC program and thought it would be a really good option. However, it's led solely by an adjunct instructor. So we thought, let's start with a full-time instructor, see how that goes, and then build from there. Some other programs we looked at were phlebotomy. We also focused on short-term programs. So the programs that students could take a couple classes in while they're in the adult ed program, and hopefully within another semester or two, complete the entire program at Carl Sandburg College. And then lastly, the other piece we looked at was ensuring that they're WIOA approved programs, because we wanted to ensure students would have those financial and wraparound supports when they entered the program. So we looked at, like I said, phlebotomy, medical assisting, rad tech, and welding. And then one other piece we looked at was the programs at Sandburg that were low enrollment, but did have very gainful employment and are in demand in our area. Because when you look at ICAPS, one of the perks is it's very mutually beneficial. It's beneficial to the adult ed network, but it's also beneficial to the community college network. It helps build our enrollment. It helps create pathways into our programs, and some alternative entry points for students beyond your traditional high school graduation, then entry into a community college. So that's a little bit about how we identified those low-hanging fruit. And then after the Transitions Academy, like we had mentioned, we went to the convos and continued to talk. And that's where we really nailed down our low-hanging fruit over the next month or so. So what we did decide to do was to move forward in automotive. We talked with the instructor. We felt like it was good timing to go ahead and move forward with that. However, we looked at phlebotomy and that instructor was part-time. So we thought, let's pause on this. The timing may not be right. And we decided to instead look at CNC as our next priority. So although we had identified where we were headed, we were also nimble and we were able to flex as we moved forward. And then one other piece, as we were identifying our low-hanging fruit, was to identify existing programs within the state that we could leverage as a resource. So for instance, we knew the CNA program had recently been approved for Spoon River College, which Spoon is our neighbor to the east, and we have a very good working relationship with their CTE department. And so they were willing to share what they had worked on to get their CNA program approved. And so that was incredibly helpful. And another perk of attending the cohort convos is that we were able to meet Robert, who's the automotive instructor from Triton College, and we were able to connect our instructor with him and bounce some questions off of him as we trekked down the path of getting our automotive program approved. So what I would encourage everyone to do there is to reach out to your partners, reach out to listservs, ask around and see who has these programs. No need to reinvent the wheel because so many of our programs are similar, maybe slightly different, but use your neighbors, use your friends, use your peers as resources. And then as we ventured down the path of filling out our applications and getting started on that, we also had to get faculty buy-in because we knew that that is vital to the success of an ICAPS program. And so, as I'd mentioned, when we attended convos, we were able to meet other faculty who had established programs in the state. And by connecting our faculty with them, it gave them some peace of mind that this is doable. It's within our reach, so let's give it a try. And we also utilize resources like the ICAPS Instructor videos and the Bridge Instructor videos that are available on the ICAPS website. We also invited our faculty in, as Margaret had mentioned, the rotating seats to our advisory meetings. And we had our faculty meet all the different folks involved from the ROE side, from the community college side, the embedded support instructor from the ROE, the bridge instructor. So they really had an idea of all the people involved that were there to support them along the way. And then the last thing we took into account as we planned ahead were for the programs that don't have full-time faculty, as we have some programs that are solely adjunct-led and facilitated, sometimes by multiple adjunct instructors who are solely part-time and may just teach one course within a program. So with that, from the Transitions Academy, we participated together in an activity where you sorted out expenses and which was allowable within the ROE Adult Ed sector and which we could utilize within the community college's Perkins sector. And so that gave us some ideas of how we could utilize Perkins to compensate faculty that are part-time for going above and beyond and working outside of their regular classroom commitment to help support an ICAPS program. At this time, we've not had to utilize any of that, but we do have it still in our plan because we foresee in the future as we build more programs that we may need to rely on that. So all in all these bits and pieces really helped in giving our instructors that peace of mind, building their confidence that this is something that we can do, and just keeping a positive outlook on the overall process. We really tried to make it as simple as possible for our faculty so they would know that we're fully here to support them and they're not in this alone. And they're absolutely not in this alone. I think they would all attest to that at this point in time. So now I'll hand it back over to Margaret. Margaret, you're muted.
Thank you. So moving forward, one of the challenges is really making sure that we have those relationships. So we have our Bridge and Transition Services Coordinator that is over at Carl Sandburg, going into the classes, meeting the faculty, so it's not an unknown person, as well as our Bridge and ICAPS instructor. So really trying to build those relationships even before we're actually creating those ICAPS. And then, of course, the relationships continue in those ICAPS advisory meetings, so that the instructors really finding that they do have those supports. And we continue to talk through that, as well as some of the other faculty at Carl Sandburg can talk about some of the supports and how the ICAPS instructor is actually helping not only the ICAPS student, but also the other students in the class. The support class is also available to the other students as well. So we invite them in. So whatever we can do to help the class as a whole. So making sure that we have the relationship with the instructor, we have those relationships with the students as well, and building the ICAPS from the adult ed side so that the students know that they're fully supported. And then we have Con He over on the Carl Sandburg side, who's also able to support the student and make sure we have those wraparound services. And then just continue to build the relationships with the Carl Sandburg staff, from the admissions to the financial aid and so on and so forth, so that we can really make sure that we're supporting the student in every single way that we can, and providing those wraparound services from our end at the ROE, the adult ed side, and then when we hand off over to Carl Sandburg.
So we quickly learned that it is very helpful from the Sandburg side to have a wraparound service person for ICAPS students specifically, so that, so for example, we had a very last minute enrolled student who was in automotive, and I was able to go and help him, meet him on campus, do the quick overview of the campus, where he could come, and also I was able to introduce him to the key faculties and student service staff, creating student ID and making sure that the student was going to where he's supposed to go and not being lost. And having the designated person for ICAPS for Sandburg staff and faculty to ask questions, making sure that none of the communication is lost in the middle. So that's, I would have to say it's important to have the wraparound service person at Sandburg, the college side.
The other part of this is really the relationship also with some of our WIOA people. We were able to reach out as far as the workforce and make sure that our students are supported that way as well. Ellen had mentioned we kind of focused on some of our CTE programs that are supported by WIOA, and then we have weekly meetings with our workforce, so that it helps to move things along a little bit quicker as far as the application process and enrollment into classes, and really making sure that the students have what they need as far as the tools for the automotive and lots of those types of things. The nice part about the ICAPS advisory monthly meetings is when we have a transition in staff and we lose somebody, it's really nice to be able to reach out to somebody to help pick us up so that those students aren't falling through the cracks. And as we get another person up and ready to roll on the ROE side, or vice versa from the Carl Sandburg side, so that we can continue to move forward for the students.
And to put into perspective, our automotive student for fall, I would say by the time we knew he was fully interested until classes started, it was about a 2 to 3 week turnaround to get through the WIOA application process, to get through Sandburg's testing and application process, to get all of his books, everything, to get his supplies, to get his toolkit. And so it was so important for everyone to be on the same page, and we all knew the different point people at each location between WIOA, Sandburg, and the ROE. And so that made it very, very smooth. Even though it was a quick process, we were still able to process all of his applications and get him in before the first day of class, even to the point he was equipped with a laptop and knew how to access our system prior to the first day of classes. So it was truly a beautiful group effort to see it all come together and be very fruitful for the student in the end.
So I started July 1st of last year, and by September, we started meeting and having those conversations about the CNA ICAPS with Carl Sandburg. So we were able to get the paperwork done and approved back in November, I believe it was. And so our first ICAPS started the following January. And we started with one student, and we were able to work through some of the kinks with that one student. And then as we moved into the fall, we have another student enrolled. We did have some transition with our bridge and transition services coordinator. We have a new one that we're uplifting and so on. And we will hopefully have more students entering the CNA ICAPS in the spring. We've also looked at some scheduling. And so the CNA ICAPS is going to move more to the morning time instead of the evening, because we found some problems with some of our students that really wanted to enroll, but the time that the class was being held was a barrier. So those were some nice conversations to have in our meetings. And so there's an adjustment coming in the spring. We were also able to get our automotive, as Ellen had talked about, all set. And we have a student that started this fall in the automotive engines, is what we call it. And that is going on this fall. And then in the spring, we have another automotive transmission. So they're stackable credits that all lead to the automotive certificate. The phlebotomy, as Ellen had mentioned earlier, we had to put a pause on. We're still going to move down that path, but for right now, there's a pause until we can get some other things ironed out. And we also had to put a pause on our paraprofessional, and part of the reasons why we put a pause on that is because we had a staff member that wasn't able at the ROE to do the paraprofessional class. So we're looking to hire somebody that can do the paraprofessional class, and then we will move forward hopefully in the spring with the class for paraprofessionals, because we have a lot of paraprofessionals sitting in our English classes that can be into the classrooms at our neighboring schools. We have landed on the CNC program, and we're going to put that into place hopefully by spring. And we're going to be looking at a different type of enrollment for that to really meet some of the needs of our adult ed. So we're looking at an evening type class that runs from, say, 5:30 to 9:30. So some of those people that are working during the day, they're going to be able to participate in this opportunity as well. As far as our bridge programs, we have learned that we need to be a little bit more broad in our bridge programs here at the ROE. So we are creating a bridge to careers, and we are hoping to have that ready to roll out our second 9 weeks here at the ROE, so that most of our students, if not all of our high school diploma students, will have completed the Bridge to Careers by December. And then that'll allow us to go into more detail for some of those students that are that they know that they're interested in healthcare, or if they're interested in manufacturing, we can dive deeper in at a later date. So the Bridge to Careers, we're excited about getting that lifted up off the ground, and I think that's going to provide a lot more flexibility for us when students change. And then as far as our other bridge programs that we have, it's a matter of continuous improvement. We will look at those, the healthcare bridge, the manufacturing, the natural resources, our business and hospitality bridges, and really try to improve those from where they were developed originally. Also, what we learned is our IELCE bridge is really what our English learners need for that career pathway exploration. So we went down that path this past year, to really make sure that our English learners are getting that career pathway knowledge as well. And we're using Burlington English. And so we're trying to hit both the students that are earning their high school diploma as well as our English language learners.
There were two words there that Margaret mentioned, and I think they're very important to think about as you might enter into this type of arrangement on the CTE side. Those are the words flexible and change. And we had to most definitely be open to change and be flexible. We met with our advisory team, and we discussed the time our classes were typically offered and how that might create a barrier to entry for some of the ICAPS students. And so with that, with our automotive program, we were working ahead enough that we were able to change our typical fall schedule so that it worked better for the ICAPS students. So for instance, we knew if they're in the high school equivalency program, it would be better to offer our courses that were the ICAPS courses in the afternoon, to kind of serve as an incentive to come and get your high school equivalency course work done in the morning. And then if you're completed, then you can go ahead and come over to the community college in the afternoon. Margaret might speak a little bit more later on what that looks like now that we're in the midst of it. But we truly had to be willing to be flexible and change so that it worked for everyone. Because in a partnership, it's not all about one person. And you may have to give a little, but in the end, it's created this really neat program that I look forward to seeing grow in the future.
So as Ellen said, we are small. I mean, we have our one student in our CNA program right now, and we have our one student in the automotive. But again, we have to start somewhere, and we've got a lot of enthusiasm going for some of the students that are here in the adult ed program. And they're learning. We've got some of our RAISE students, which is our alternative education program. We have the student who's actually going over to Carl Sandburg, working in the library before the ICAPS support class. And he's working on finishing up some of his high school classes during that time. So he's not going to RAISE. So he's not being seen by the other students on Mondays and Wednesdays. He's actually at Carl Sandburg. And as he's working in the morning on those high school equivalency classes, he continues to work towards that high school diploma. The other students back at RAISE are also aware of this. And then he goes to his ICAPS support class from 9:30 to 11:30, where he works with our ICAPS instructor. And then from there, he's got an hour lunch where he's on the college campus, and then goes over to the automotive building where he finishes his day. So the enthusiasm from some of our students is growing, and we hope to have more students in our ICAPS transmissions program in the spring. The enthusiasm also is growing for the CNA. As we said earlier, it's being moved to the morning time, and that's only going to hopefully increase some participation as well. Both of those programs are WIOA approved, so it helps move students through the program, as well as our IBT grant. So we were able to fund a couple of our students in the CNA program They weren't WIOA students, they did not qualify, but we were able to support the students in the CNA program with a different grant funds. So again, that flexibility is important. And that something a little bit unique with the support classes, we actually built in time for our CNA students to study 2 weeks after the Carl Sandburg class ends. They're studying for their state exam. And our ICAPS instructor is helping facilitate that. And again, other students can choose to attend that study time. And so far we're 1 for 1, and hopefully soon in December we'll be 2 for 2 with that type of a model. And again, we're unique because the ROE does the Adult Ed, but Carl Sandburg does the CTE and some of the other post-secondary classes that we'll expand into. But we were able to bridge that communication gap with our ICAPS advisory meetings that we held monthly, as well as building those relationships. As far as moving forward, as we talked about before, is we're focused right now on building our CNC program, and then we'll see what brings, what other classes or ICAPS bring in the future. I'll turn it over to Connie so she could talk a little bit about some of the things that she was able to put in place for our students that was quite useful.
So as a ICAPS wraparound support person, we learned that some students struggled with our Sandburg entrance exam AccuPlacer. So now Sandburg is providing free tutoring support for preparing for the exam. Like Margaret explained how we learned that students would need a separate space for studying and attending their ICAPS support class. So library room arrangement was also done by me. So it's wraparound person is quite useful. And we will share our student interview video at the end of this presentation.
So as far as just some final thoughts for you as you move forward, the monthly meetings have been incredible so that we can answer those questions right away and keep moving forward. That's the biggest piece. Everybody's busy and nobody wants one more meeting, but quite frankly, I think everybody looks forward to these meetings. We try to keep them fun, and it's been very efficient. And I think that's the biggest part in having that agenda. And we stick to the agenda and are very mindful of everybody's time. And again, we started from the very beginning just with a Google Doc. With the CNA instructor was a part of that, which was really, really important because it was supposed to be co-teaching was a word that was used. And she pointed out that couldn't happen. And it was so important to have her there so that we could think outside the box, call it something different, and continue to move forward and build everything out that we needed. So we welcome new members to help us build out our ICAPS programs and make sure that they're a part of that process. And then when we need to, they're part of that rotating seat. They don't have to attend every month. We keep things moving and we keep them in the loop through our notes that we send out. And other people are able to have those communications as well, who are coming to the meetings and keeping things moving. That's the biggest part, which helps with the staff turnover. We've had that I mentioned earlier, where we had some staff turnover, and Carl Sandburg is able to help us fill in some of those gaps as we move those students to registration and getting them to class and showing them around and so on and so forth. That's been incredibly powerful. As far as making sure that our instructors have access to the LMS at Carl Sandburg, that's been vital. And again, It's a real quick conversation in an ICAPS meeting instead of a whole bunch of emails going around that somebody thinks that somebody has access to something that they truly don't. So that's been quite helpful. And then the JOT form, we just turn it into a Google form, and we sit around and we fill those out and make sure that the instructor has a piece of that, as well as the ICAPS instructor and everybody else that needs to be a part. And it's been a very smooth process. And the biggest thing is really reaching out to those neighbors that already have a program that's been approved, and starting from that point and being able to massage that and get it to where it needs to be for what we need.
And Margaret said we sit around, and we actually do physically sit around in a circle at times. We found that, our meetings are set for an hour. Sometimes we have found that it's important to schedule additional time, like a work session. And when we have come to the point where feeling really good about our draft, we'll actually get together, sit in a circle together with everyone live in the Word document, or the Google document, sorry. Like she said, massaging it, putting the finishing touches on it, reviewing it together as a team. We've also done this virtually, but it really helps to have that live conversation as we get to the final steps as we're working together in that collaborative document. So it's been a really neat blend of meeting virtually, meeting in person, meeting virtually, but working in live documents together to make it all work.
And I think that the biggest takeaway for all of us is that permission to start small and just get going. It doesn't have to be perfect. If we're waiting for perfection, we're just not going to get there. We need to get going and shoot for excellence. I believe I heard that somewhere at a conference, and that's kind of our motto, is shoot for excellence and keep moving and improving. And so start small.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. I hope you found something helpful.